Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Lower Makefield Township Ad Hoc Property Committee meeting. My name is Dennis Stedman, the committee chair. We appreciate your interest and time this evening. We have nearly the full committee. We have 6 of 7 members, as well as our Board of Supervisors liaison, Suzanne Blundy, on, and I see some of our invited stakeholders on, Jim Majewski included. So with that, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we have some changes to the agenda. So if I could, I want to bring up the agenda, and I want to share my screen. And is that being shared?
Yes, it is.
Okay, let me. Thank you. On our agenda this evening, I have a couple statements to make in terms of introduction. We had a meeting only last week. Typically, we approve the meeting minutes from the prior meeting, but it's been a short turnaround. Not everyone has had full opportunity to review those minutes, so it's been suggested, and I support that we table the approval of minutes to the next meeting. I want people to have time to review those. We have received master plan contractor bids. We're going to ask our project manager, Jennifer Stark, to lead the conversation about those bids and see if the committee can come to a consensus on a selection there. We have a topic of community outreach and engagement. Ron Schmidt, our newest member, is going to lead that discussion. I have a kind of a last minute addition here. I've asked Joe Camarata, who is a member of the committee and also the chair of Lower Makefield Historical Commission, to provide some comments and background on National Register of Historical Places, an overview of that. I think there's varying kind of understandings of that. Joe has an excellent grasp of that, and I think he can shed some light that will be important to all of us. And then, of course, we'll have our public comment period. In terms of an introduction, I would just like to say that it's 25 years ago now that the Lower Makefield Township had the foresight to purchase Patterson Farm. It was in the aftermath of a tremendous building boom, 221 pristine agricultural acres with 2 farmsteads and a total of 15 outbuildings in total. And so in an attempt to prevent that from falling under the development pressure, the township purchased that, and it is a township asset, and we were fortunate that they prevented that becoming more residential houses. At least I believe we all believe that. The township, however, never developed a real long-term plan for the property. And as a result of that, even though the land has been leased to a local farmer and in continuous agricultural production, the buildings have fallen into disrepair, many of them severely, some of them less so. There has been some rental activity. 2 buildings have been rented to local art organizations, and so those buildings are in better condition. The majority of the farm, not all of it, but the majority of it is protected by an agricultural easement that prevents it from being developed and requires it to stay in agriculture. In 2021, the Lower Makefield Township decided to form a committee of local residents, volunteers, to look at this property, and that's what this committee is, the Ad Hoc Property Committee. and to make recommendations. The committee worked through the back half of 21 and in March of 22, made a series of recommendations to the Lower Makefield Township supervisors. That those recommendations were generally well received, and they included 3 primary bullets. One is that Patterson Farm needs to stay in agriculture. That's its history, and that is the land is restricted to that use primarily. Number 2, the historical buildings are important, and Lower Makefield's in a historical area here in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and so those buildings should try to be preserved as best as possible. And third, that a building without a use is not going to survive. It's going to die, and we have examples of that on Patterson Farm. So we are tasked to look at uses of these buildings, community uses, and other reuses, so that we can save this property, and including the buildings, and create utility for our community. Even though it's obviously there's expenses involved, we want to gain that utility. So with those recommendations, amongst those recommendations was the development of a master plan for the site, so that investments, as investments are made and decisions are made, they can be done in a thoughtful way, knowing what the path forward would be. And that's where we are now. This committee has been tasked to develop that master plan. We've hired a professional architectural firm, a Vision Young, to act as a project manager. And we're fortunate to have Jennifer Stark, also a local Lower Makefield resident, to act as in that project management role. And we appreciate her the professionalism that's brought to this project. So that's where we are. We're in the midst of this creating a master plan. We've issued RFPs to architectural and engineering firms. That includes landscaping, site design firms, to help us with this master plan development. And we've received 2 quality bids that the committee has reviewed, and the committee has discussed, and we've interviewed each firm for 1 hour last week via this Zoom mechanism. And so tonight our primary mission is to discuss a selection of the successful bidder. That will take the form of a recommendation to the township. This committee cannot spend township's money. The township only can do that, but we will recommend a contractor to the township if we can reach agreement this evening on that, and we'll take it from there. In discussing these bids and these contractors, we've had some interesting discussions, and quite frankly, important discussions around how we make decisions, how this committee should make decisions, and our decisions will be recommendations to the property owner. And I think it is healthy for any board, any team, any organization to kind of pause a little bit and talk about their decision-making process, to be sure we're tapping into all the expertise, all the ideas, all the thoughts in a quality way. So I would like to spend a few minutes talking about this committee's decision-making and making a proposal towards that end of kind of how we go about this. Now, I serve on the Lower Makefield Township Farmland Preservation Board. That is a incorporated. It's not part of the township. It's a separate private nonprofit entity that owns preserved farmland in Lower Makefield Township. It does not have any relationship to Patterson Farm. That board on which I serve has developed over the years a code of conduct that I have to say has served that board very, very well. And one element of that code of conduct that I'd like to just surface here with this committee is under the category of decision making, and there's 4 bullets. And so I'm stealing this from farmland preservation, which maybe is just we could call it research as well, I guess. The first is, before we close a meeting, we make sure we have all the same understandings of any decisions and action items, that we're on the same page. We don't want to end meetings with confusion or too open ends. The real meat of it that I'd like to talk to this board about and get reactions to is B here, which is consensus, which is what we always try to reach as a team, as a board, as a committee, means that all opinions have been heard, all opinions have been understood, and potentially documented through our meeting minutes and these Zoom calls. We recognize that 100% agreement is not always achievable. Very well-intended, smart people can have honest differences of opinion. That's life, that's expected. But 100% listening, 100% understanding, and 100% acceptance is possible. And that is when a decision is taken, even if maybe a single individual might have been a no vote or on having an opposing view, with the right listening and understanding, it's important that everyone accept the decision of the whole. Now, formally, our decision making is a majority rules. There's 7 committee members. That's 4 votes or more carries the day. But we do want to be sure that we're listening, understanding, considering all the inputs, and trying to achieve this consensus that whatever the decision is in the end that the majority makes, everyone can accept that and act in good faith to implement that. The remaining 2 pieces are documents and decisions and reasoning and rationale. What will be documented, and input from observers and guests during board meetings, or in this case committee meetings, are always welcome, always considered, but the decisions at the end of the day are those of the board or those of the committee. I'd like to just pause there because the decision that we want to make tonight on the contractor may not be I don't think will be the biggest decision we make by any stretch, but it's putting us on a path of decision making and recommending. And we're going to have a lot of recommendations and a lot of trade-offs as we develop this master plan as we go forward. So it does seem appropriate time to kind of talk about this topic. So I'm going to pause there and ask the committee for any feedback, any thoughts on this subject. And if no one volunteers, I'll call on people.
Dennis, I want to just say, I think many of us have served on many different boards and commissions, and these are certainly the best practices that you bring forward, and I don't have a problem with them. Thank you for bringing them up.
Thank you. Any other?
I think these are good practices and should be implemented.
Thank you, John.
I agree as well. As long as there's no requirement by the Board of Supervisors or by the Township Code that asks for committees such as us to have actual votes confirmed in the minutes. But otherwise, I think this is a good practice and a good start to how we go forward.
Yeah, I would, Dennis. I would concur. I think it's interesting that we're discussing this early on like this, and I think that's important that we all put our hands in the middle and agree to a decision-making process as we go forward. My sense of it is there's going to be a lot of decisions along the way that could be difficult. And I think it's important that reaching a consensus on these issues and having everybody bought in and then implementing it as a whole, as a group, is a good thing to do. So I'm very supportive of this process as well.
And then it's just a point of clarification, because you say consensus, but you also said that majority rules. And so I think we should probably add a bullet point around that. I mean, if we are going to vote as a 7-member committee and the majority rules, I think we should probably document that that's how consensus is reached, unless you had another meaning there.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. It should be stated. Like I say, I just lifted this straight from farmland preservation as an example. But I think as a committee, we can tailor this. We should tailor this and be sure that it's what we want and that we live up to it. I know on farmland preservation, we have amongst our code of conduct is that every year, January meeting, we're going to review all these things. We're going to talk about it. It's going to be on our agenda in January. And so, I'm happy to, with the support of this committee, to make this our own, and that kind of tailoring, Joe, I think makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Jennifer, you were the insightful one that asked the question originally. How do you make decisions? So, having been involved in a lot of project management and a lot of different difficult kind of decision making, would you have any counsel, guidance, reactions here for us?
I think that you're on a great path here. I do like the idea of the fifth bullet talking about actually having a vote so that there's a firm record, especially if there are maybe a couple of outliers. You want to make sure that's documented for the future.
Okay. All right.
Dennis, you
yes.
didn't ask me, but I'll say anyway. And I'm glad that you didn't ask me. I'm fine. I'll speak up when I need to. I will get any clarification from you, but my understanding from the other boards, committees, adjuncts of the township is that for action to be taken, it's a majority of the members present. Right?
That is true.
Things will be agendized so that people know. And votes will be taken. I love these points, and anyone who does the mini New York Times crossword puzzle, right? A clue today was we have 2, so we hear more, and only 1, so we say less. So I love the idea of listening and really making sure people's points of view are heard. If consensus can't be majority vote, it's not time to vote that night. Things can always be put over, so people can think and maybe talk it out. But ultimately, for the group to take action or make a recommendation, there's going to have to be a vote. It's going to have to be a majority.
Mm-hmm.
And if I said anything that's wrong, I will correct it after I talk to our solicitor.
Okay. Thank you. No, your point's well taken. It is a majority of those present. We need to be a quorum. We have to have the majority of members present. So we have a quorum with 4. Which means 3 votes out of 4 in that circumstance is would carry the day. And I know as part of good behavior and good practice, if a decision is potentially really controversial, very significant, we would do everything in our power to avoid a vote when there's only 4 committee members present. I mean, we would want to have everyone to the extent that's possible present for such a vote. So I think those are all good refinements and additions to this, and if the committee supports it, I would. I can take these 4 points back. I can make the kinds of edits or additions that we've talked about here tonight, and circulate it back to the committee in our next formal meeting. We can review that, and if we're in agreement, we can take a formal action to adopt them. I'm happy to do that. I think it's putting a stake in the ground, which is appropriate, it seems, for a property committee to put a stake in the ground on these kinds of behaviors. So I'll bet I will take the assignment to redraft this procedure here before the next meeting. Anything else on that? Okay. Very good. Well, thank you.
I'm sorry,
Dennis.
I think
Yes.
Stephen has.
Dennis,
Steve?
you asked for other little things. One of the things that Jennifer said, it sounded like the documentation of people taking exception to certain issues might be just as important. So if it's a controversial decision, it might be well to consider having like a minority report, or in the Supreme Court, it's the minority response to the decision, and just so that the issues that were brought up by people having problems with the decision don't get forgotten. Right.
No, I understand. And thank you, Steve. I think documentation and minutes are important. I actually don't care for the idea of minority reports. I think it goes against consensus, because the goal of consensus is whether it was your first choice or not, you understand the trade-offs that were made, you understand the pros and the cons, and you're going along with the decision. That's what I'd like to see. Document the differences, absolutely. I'd rather personally, the minority reports, I think, tend to be more destructive than constructive, but that's my opinion. I'll put something like to that effect in the draft, and let's kick it around. Let's kick it around. Okay. Other comments, questions on this? Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you all for that. I'm going to let's go to the main item tonight. Well, I shouldn't say the main. There's a couple items, but the biggest item tonight, the master plan contractor bids. Jennifer, could you lead that discussion for us? And I know everyone has opinions and observations on that, so I'm expecting a good discussion.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Dennis. Okay, I think what I'll do is I'll just lay the groundwork for the committee members to start speaking. Just to give a little bit of a background, what we did was we took the two proposals, we broke them down into their components, compared them side by side, and then we had an opportunity to do small breakout groups within the committee to talk about first impressions and candid thoughts. Just to give an idea of what the talking points were, we talked about how each team presented their track record of relevant projects. We also talked about how did they demonstrate an understanding of the assignment we were going to give to them, and how did they listen to us. We talked about how they demonstrated their commitment to staffing and how much personal energy they were putting into our project. We also talked about, did they show any creative thought or wishful thinking that was interesting, demonstrated that they had taken our charge and run with it a bit, even before being awarded the project. We also talked about if it seemed like their decision-making style was fit with the way the current committee and LMT thinks. Were they of like mind? And we also, obviously, at the end, we talked about the cost presented and the time frame that they anticipated the project to take. So all of these things were part of each little sub-discussion that we had, so that we were able to walk away with an understanding of where most committee members were coming in with this initial thought process. Dennis, I don't know, the next thing to do is to dive into some of the differences between each firm based on impressions and thoughts from the committee members.
The only addition I would make, Jennifer, to that list, which I thought was a good one, and unless I missed it, was the relevance of their past experience. Did you say that? I didn't. I
Yeah,
mean,
that was the number one thing at the top of my list.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I'm happy to have anyone take the lead. I'm reluctant to, because I talk too much on these. I'd rather hear from some others. I do have to say that both John and Jim Scott are. This is more your world, being in the real estate project management development arena, looking at bids and things. Either one of you want to take a first stab for us?
That is short. I look at the proposals. I mean, both groups look qualified. You know, personally, I like the more local experience. The one group, I think that's important. Is you know, they rely on supporting vendor networks and so forth. So that would be a differentiator for me.
That was the Seller Drury group.
Correct.
Yes. The two bids are Seller Drury and Connell Hickey?
Connolly and Hickey, yes.
Connolly and Hickey. Thank you. So just keep straight.
In my opinion, I was not on the call last week, but I did watch the video. The Seiler bid was the lower bid. I did have some concerns that they were with their scope, but I think they addressed those concerns. And if an additional service request is required, we do have the additional space in the budget to cover that.
Mm-hmm. One of the key differentiators between the two, in my observations, between Seller Drury and Connell Hickey, was the subcontracting landscape architecture. In the case of Seller Drury, that subcontractor was particularly not only passionate but knowledgeable and experienced in agricultural issues. He talked about sustainable agriculture. He talked, you know, they've worked on projects that had an agricultural orientation, not just, you know, kind of standard landscaping. He was speaking to the soil and to the runoffs, and he was extremely knowledgeable on the environmental issues that with a property like this. And I thought, even if all other things equal, the difference between the two landscape architectures was stark and significant in the favor of Suller Drury. Of course, not all things are equal. Suller Drury was also much lower priced, but that single dimension, it was pretty clear to me.
I agree with Dennis on that. I think that I asked Connell Hickey the question around ecology and the ecological concerns, and they just said they didn't have the experience, or they weren't maybe the right people on the call to answer that. With regards to Suller Drury, I would say that I have a little bit of concern that it's a confederation of contractors as opposed to coming all out of one. And maybe that's the way it is in this field. Maybe kind of like Hickey just presented a much more unified front. And then the other thing is that what John's question around the scope, the scope around the public input, they completely missed that. And again, that's a really important piece here. It's a really important piece here, right? And, they certainly said, well, the landscape architect's done that before, he can handle it, but we didn't get good details. And I don't know if in the meantime, you've gotten any pricing around that, because it's just not in the scope they sent us.
Jennifer, did you get an update on that?
We did, and you, Fred, Candace, and I received that. They satisfied our question about appropriate numbers of outreach meetings, stakeholder meetings, public meetings. Were covered.
But they did not specifically say that would require additional fee or time. And that's one of my biggest concerns with Suller Drury, is they were underpriced, I think, and as they said, had a very aggressive schedule and fee schedule. And I think we would have to watch them carefully, that they stay on scope and do not wander off into unrealistic ideas. And also, just concerned that their concept of what we're expecting fills what we need, because I think they've really cut their price and their schedule to the point where we may not get a complete product in the end. And I think that's my primary concern. I agree that both firms have qualified, experienced people from all aspects. Conley Hickey certainly had the more organized and comprehensive and detailed plan to go forward with the project, and but they were overpriced, I think, and they, as they said, they were generous in their schedule and their fee, and I think they were over generous. The fact that Conley Hickey really did not demonstrate any local or Pennsylvania experience really is a drawback, for them. Whereas Suller Drury is certainly Pennsylvania oriented and has contacts and connections and networking with the appropriate organizations and agencies that will need support from. So, but I think it's going to take some oversight on our part. Suller Drury seems to have a lot more questions than answers for us at this point.
Yeah, I think, Dennis, I would weigh in for Suller, Powers, Simone over Conley and Hickey. My reasons are Jennifer mentioned about 7 criteria, and on those criteria, I found that Conley and Hickey was a little off point. on some of their presentation. I thought that Seller Powers Simone were more on point and had more direct experience with the situation that we're dealing with rather than Connolly Hickey. I also checked out, and I mentioned this both to Dennis and to Jennifer, because Mr. Powers, who is part of the Seller group, and trust me, I have no axe to grind here, but he did mention on the last call that he did work at Pennsbury Manor. I called over to Doug Miller, our site administrator, to get a sense of how he felt about Powers, who I guess at the time was with a different firm, but he was very satisfied with the results. They did a lot of renovation, well over $100,000 to a lot of our buildings over there. And because of that, they even had to deal with PHMC, the Commonwealth group that manages our sites. So they had to deal with a lot of bureaucratic situations. And Doug felt like they really delivered on time and that the project was well done. So, and I also thought that Seller Powers Simone were more creative. Now there's positives and negatives to creativity, you know. I love to hear it and I want to embrace it, but you know, when I embrace it, I realize it may cost money. But I like their creativity in terms of the way they presented what they would do and some of their thinking. So I would wash out with Seller Powers and Simone.
Okay, so I'll chime in because I haven't yet and echo a few of the other comments in favor of Cellar Drury. Because of their enthusiasm, I think their energies around creative reuse and their experience in Pennsylvania projects around creative reuse was very exciting. And their interest in sustainable agriculture and future forward-looking things about agriculture in the community and the food chain, I thought was very exciting. I also like the fact that they talked about a lot about bringing the community in and making it sustainable with a number of uses. So I'm excited about that too.
I think that both groups presented us a very similar process. We're going to come in, we're going to do conditions assessments. This will help us roll in and roll out what potential uses can be. We're going to get somehow a list of uses, you know, and then we're going to go back and we're going to create, you know, based on those uses, we're going to estimate the cost of, you know, rehabilitation or restoration or what have you and maintenance around that. And I think that both are very qualified from, and I'm not an expert in this area, but from the whole architecture and the drawings and all of that, that's fine. To me, the difference here is going to be, how are we going to reach a decision around the possible uses? And what Seller Drury has in their proposal is, we're going to come back to this committee, we're going to go to the board and we're going to ask them, right? And unless we feel that we are in the position to speak for the community as a whole on this, I just would like to see how they're going to do it. I mean, unless we're going to take that responsibility ourselves.
I would just be cautious. I understand the need for creativity, but you know, they need to understand that this is not an open park. That's a recreation facility. It's a working farm for part of it. Other uses are there. There's an industrial involvement with the mulching operation. There's heavy equipment moving in and out. It's not a place for people to jog and walk and take pictures and you know, it's not a park. So they need to understand that there's a limit to the creativity. And there's also a portion, obviously a large portion of the property that is not going to be agriculture. And it can't be, as we've seen, there's no sustainable use for some of those buildings that will maintain them in a usable condition. They're not in a state of good repair. They're not accessible to the public and shouldn't be at the present, in their present condition. And so they need to understand what the actual situation is and what the realistic goals that we have for the township and the financial responsibility that the township has and the liability that falls upon the township and the taxpayer. So again, I just think they need to be creative within the limits of this property's potential uses.
And I think I agree, Fred, that there's natural tension, right, between creativity and some of the things you said in terms of it's an active farm and there's industrial aspects. And you're right. It's not going to become a park, right? We know that. But that's where we do need some creativity to figure out appropriate uses that are compatible with some of these givens. Agriculture is the obvious one. I'm sure either firm is going to figure that out real fast if they don't already know it. I guess one of the reactions that I had between the two presentations is I felt that Connell and Hickey were presenting an engineering project, and it was buttoned up and it was dry and it was A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It was highly organized, very linear. And that's fine for an engineering project. This isn't an engineering project. We have to create a master plan. That master plan will rely upon some engineering and engineering estimates and cost estimates. We need engineering.
Mhm.
We need engineers and architects involved, but it's not we're not asking them to do the detailed engineering and do any renovations or rehabilitations at all. We're creating something that is by definition in that amorphous gray area. And so I did like the fact that Seller Drury spent the majority of their time talking about those gray areas of creating a master plan, and a minority of their time in the tight engineering bucket. And I thought Connolly Hickey was just the reverse. They were mostly talking about just engineering, and then, oh yeah, by the way, there's some choices to be made. So I thought the Seller Drury it would be my pick. And again, the cost differential is nearly 2x. And I think it's important that we have some headroom in the budget for the surprises. There may be surprises. There may be needs for other kinds of consultants or services that we haven't that we haven't foreseen. So that would be where my vote would go.
No, I think that's an accurate description of the two. I did want to mention on the agriculture end of it, the gentleman from Simone Collins, the landscape group that they are subbing with, or as part of the team, in talking about sustainable agriculture, and I'm not sure what all else he had in mind, talking about diversity of crops. I think, and I don't know, I'll leave it to Dennis and others who have more familiarity with the agriculture aspect, but I did see a document that we reviewed that talked about the crop rotation in order to maintain the soil's classification by the state or county. So I think there's some limitations there, and the farmer hasn't been, they also talked about having the farmer live on or farm hands live on the property. That's just another, let's be realistic here. That's not what we're looking for. And I think the farmer will certainly have some input on what kind of crops he can or can't rotate into that area.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, now the way it's being farmed, Charland Farms does use minimum tillage, or I'm sorry, no tillage, which falls under the umbrella of sustainable. They are using, modern, to my knowledge, best practices. They're doing a 2-year soybeans, 1-year corn rotation, which is required for soil in those kinds of large crops. But for a good portion of the farm, it's where they grow their vegetables, and there's I think over a dozen vegetables grown back in that area. So they do have a diversity of crops, and I don't think it'll be necessarily in the mission of this master plan to try to articulate to the farmer what they grow or anything else. But the ideas, I just thought there was a level of expertise that could be brought to the table through that individual, through that firm, that could prove useful as we look at this land use, and develop the site. I mean, we talk a lot about the engineering of the buildings, but it's also how they're organized and how they're, how people move between them, or how the equipment is moved between them, and access and that type of thing. So I do see a real need for broader site planning as part of this master plan to help manage some of those conflicts, Fred, that you're talking about that are kind of inherent.
Understood.
I mean, I 100% agree. I mean, back to the earlier discussion, I mean, this is a farm, and we had said that we will stay true to its agricultural roots. So whatever master plan that we do, or whatever we do with the buildings, needs to recognize that these buildings are on a farm, and there's, other wildlife that is there, right? So the plan needs to, again, back to what Dennis said, it's not a park. We can't just go putting concrete everywhere either, So I really do like that aspect of it. But I guess this, when I looked at the projects that they presented to us, the usage of the buildings were, I would say, apparent. They were reusing the buildings, or they were updating the buildings for their current use, right? But that's not the case for Patterson Farm. The buildings aren't used today. They're vacant. They're deteriorating. And what we're struggling with as a township is to figure out what are the appropriate uses of that building. And what I didn't see in the proposal, and I guess what I'm asking for is either they're going to come to us, the scope that they put out and the price they put out says they're coming to us and asking us, right?
Right.
If
Right.
we want that to be broader than that, if we want to have community outreach, I just wanted to see how they propose doing that and how that impacted the price and the schedule. Because Connolly and Hickory did talk about use analysis, right? And in some of theirs, they did talk about, a building that was being partially used as a museum and had multiple uses and things like that, which are viable alternatives for us. So that resonated with me in terms of the reuse of the historic building, some of the cases they presented.
Unless Jennifer understands otherwise, it sounds like they intend to squeeze it in somehow into their initial proposal.
I can clarify that. We asked them to expand on the fact that they did not include public meetings, stakeholder meetings enough in their base proposal. We asked them to revisit that, and they provided us with an updated number for fee, and they also gave a 3-part description of how they plan to approach stakeholder interview discussions, meetings with the steering committee, and meetings with the public. I'd be happy to read what he sent.
The only fee I saw was for the public, for a separate organization to do public outreach.
No, they gave us they updated their spreadsheet with their fees. So that's where all these meetings are captured. The market analysis was a separate line item. You're correct.
Okay, I guess I didn't see that.
That's okay.
I think the conversation is naturally leads into that topic of market analysis, that was brought up by Seller Drury in one of their projects that they cited, and I, for one, feel that seems very appropriate. I mean, I think just what was said in terms of, the potential uses, reuses of these buildings. It's not obvious. So I'm very open to including in the project a more formal market analysis that could be done for the area, and an assessment of where the demand is. I mean, our next topic is going to be about community outreach and community involvement, and Ron's going to lead that discussion, and we'll I'm sure get healthy community input. But a market assessment front loaded in the beginning of this does seem like it would be money well spent as part of the proposal. And at this stage, Jennifer, I think they said if we added that in, they didn't have a specific proposal, but it would be in the ballpark of 20 to 25,000.
Right. And then there's also the opportunity to have them manage that consultant, and then there's a pass through, or the township could contract directly and manage themselves.
Okay.
Is there a new base figure then from Seiler Drury?
Yes, the new base is 114,400.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And on a like to like Connell Hickey number, comparative number,
261,300.
261 versus 114. Okay. And the 114, does that include a market assessment?
No.
No. So if we did a market assessment as part of that, that could be closer to 139, call it 140. But still, compared to 260, it's massive difference. Okay.
Sorry, can I just maybe take a break and just ask a question? But if there was additional information that came in that was relevant to tonight's discussion, why doesn't the committee have the information if we're expected to make a vote tonight?
Did you just got that, Jennifer?
Did I miss that, or?
What I do is I share all information with you and Fred as the chair, co-chair. And I leave it to you to distribute as you see fit.
Yeah, and I've been on calls all day. I don't know when that came in this afternoon, but I apologize. I'll redistribute that out. I just saw it quickly in my inbox.
Dennis, I just noticed it. I was kind of out of it for the last few days, but Jennifer did send it to us on yesterday.
Was it yesterday? Okay.
Afternoon, and it does have their updated price list and some other information.
Okay.
So it does appear to include.
Can you put it on screen?
Yeah, let me try to. Hold on a sec. It does include the 28,000, which I think is the I see 103,000, 124. Hang on a second.
Oh yeah, I see it. It includes the 28,000 for the market analysis. So actually things are even better. So you subtract the 10,000 for the NR nomination, which we're not doing. So we are at 114,400.
I'll share the fee breakdown. I think that's a appropriate.
Okay.
Let me see if I can.
If you can't get it, I've got it open as well.
Okay, why don't you do it?
All right. Now, let's see if I can make this bigger. Okay, everybody can see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Great.
Yeah, again, sorry, I didn't realize that was included in the email yesterday.
That's all right. You straightened me out as well because the market analysis is in here.
So
Oh, I see.
Jennifer,
And
can
with
I ask,
with the market analysis, it's 124.4.
But subtract that 10,000 for the National Register.
Yeah, that comes out. That's how you got to 114. Okay.
I
Yeah.
see.
Jennifer, can I ask, and we sort of touched on this last time, but maybe to revisit it again. So this bid is coming in at 124, maybe minus the 10 for the National Registry. The other bid, I think we just said, was 261. What are your observations as to why there is this vast difference between these two bids?
Well, usually what it boils down to is how aggressive the firm wants to be to try to get the work. That's one reason.
Yes.
Another reason is the cost of their overhead could be very different. Another reason is efficiencies that they think that they offer or have. So those are kind of like the short list of why prices vary firm to firm.
Sure. Okay.
I think they specifically said, both of them in their presentations when they did their interviews with us. Connolly Hickey described it as being generous, and Seiler Drury described it as being aggressive. So
Right. Yeah.
I think they each took their own different look at how this would work out.
Right. And one of the questions that I had with the lower cost bid of Seller Drury is, are they going to have enough information on each building to provide for us the estimates, ballparkish estimates of cost for various uses as we go through that analysis, and Jennifer assures me that they will. And again, this kind of reminds me that I think it's a master planning project that relies on some engineering. It's not an engineering project that's, by the way, doing a master plan. And I think the Connell Hickey just seemed to kind of, maybe they engineered themselves out of it. I don't know.
Jennifer, is there a description of when they say public meetings 3 and market study analysis, what they mean by that?
Yeah. The market study analysis is with a company called Forward Planning. That's who Pete Simone was alluding to when he talked about a market analysis during their presentation. They're the specialists who can look for appropriate partnership opportunities for the township. They're also the ones who can look at appropriate uses based on proximity to similar uses, so that there's a no competition, or if there's a need for more of something, and if we provide it, it will only benefit us. That's the kind of thinking that will be brought forth with the market study analysis. Let's see, I'm going to the document where they talk about the public meetings. Are you guys seeing this too? I'm not sure how this works in Zoom.
We're still seeing the fee breakdown.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes, Jennifer, you have to stop sharing, switch onto the new document, and then reshare if there's something else to share.
yeah, I don't know. This is a lot of words. Would you like to see? He wrote 3 paragraphs about how he plans to approach meetings and getting stakeholder and public input. It's comprehensive because I shot back at them with the question of, I really want to make sure that you understand that we want to have generous conversation. So yes, that's what they understand.
I have to say that I think those of us on the committee who had not seen this in advance are feeling a little annoyed. So if you're going to be Jennifer, if you're going to be sending things to Fred and to Dennis, that's fine, but Dennis and Fred, you're going to need to know to distribute, which may not be evident since this is a new process.
Yeah, I mean, typically I try to do that.
I
It's
know.
just this one fell through. But Jennifer, if you could, if you have all that open and identified, send it all to the committee now, if you could, so they have it.
I'll just do that now, Dennis.
Oh, you got it, Fred? Okay. Okay.
This is the email from
Doug.
Doug. I'm not sure if I've got everything.
Okay.
Well, let me see
What
if
is the committee's short of this topic of this comparative? What's the sense from this committee in terms of including a market assessment in this project? I for one believe it's a good idea. What do other committee members think?
I think a market analysis will give us a better idea of actual usage capabilities and possibilities for the buildings. My question is 3 numbers, I guess the line above that sticks in my head is the public meetings, or is 3 the number we want? We want 2 or 3 or that's it, in my opinion. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see in the email that Fred's sharing, they talk about 4 public meetings in his expanded explanation. He talks about 4 separate steering committee meetings. And then they 1 primary meeting with stakeholders per entity. Figures these will be single days, include survey visits. Like I said, it's pretty comprehensive, but you'll see.
Dennis, a comment to your question on the market study. I like the concept. My only concern there is after we maybe solicit ideas, some may be proven to not be feasible based on cost. In terms of, for what type of operation or occupancy, once we get into, occupancy requirements, whether it's restroom, utilities, I would just hate to see that survey not be applicable. So the question is it done upfront? Do we need more engineering and cost feedback on the structures themselves to maybe put some parameters on, what's realistic?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for my 2 cents, Dennis, I mean, my gut says a market analysis is great. What do we have a sense of what the deliverables would be on that? Jennifer, I guess that question is to you.
I'm going to say no. I don't want to make an assumption. We need to talk to forward planning, tell them what we're trying to achieve, and let them tell us what deliverable makes sense and when it makes sense to do it.
I mean, I would agree with Ron. I think it's nice. It sounds really good, but the devil's in the details in terms of what are the deliverables. And looking at the email that Fred sent over, I don't see the information around the public meetings and what they intend to do. I see the the PDF from forward planning, and I see another, but it only is only like a spreadsheet. It's a fee summary.
There's a second one that I just sent as well.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, and that one is full of
Okay.
green font. You
Yeah, I see
can't
it now. Thank you.
miss it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we should have maybe organize a call with forward planning to talk to them about the market analysis, what the deliverables are, what the scope is, what timing makes sense to Jim's, thought, well, do you want some engineering first to kind of set some parameters, or do you want to do it early and have everything on the table? So I think we should organize a call with them, kind of an ad hoc call that if we can get see how many committee members we can get on that, so that we can get a proposal from them that can be reviewed for that market analysis, whether that's an included item or not. We don't know enough about it at this stage to say yay or nay, it seems. Okay.
Are we tabling the
Jennifer?
decision, the selection decision then?
You want to take an informal poll, not a formal motion, but an informal poll of the seven. I think that would be productive. Give us direction.
I agree.
I'll vote for Seller Drury.
Jennifer, in the meantime, while we're doing that, can you scroll up your screen there to the prior page that shows their kind of a summary? Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
So I'll do a roll call.
Go for it.
Fred,
I'm okay with Siler Drury with the concerns that I've expressed.
Joe Camerata,
I'm actually okay with either. I think from a point of view, they can both do it. I just want to make sure that what we include in the scope is what we need.
Ron,
Fellow Drury,
John,
Tyler Jury.
Jim,
Siler Drury.
and I'm Siler Drury. That's I guess that's almost unanimous.
Okay. Let's be sure we Jennifer made a good point, and Suzanne, you correct us if we're not thinking right, but we want to get before we take anything to the Board of Supervisors in terms of a recommendation, we want it to be holistic. We don't want to come back, in a month for some change order or add-on, or in 2 months or something. So I do think it's worth taking some time to learn more about the market assessment and let the committee evaluate whether that is a productive use of that 28,000, if that's the proposed cost. And that way we can fold it in so that we have a holistic recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Does that make sense, Suzanne?
Yeah, I think it's great. I was startled by one of the presenters when somebody asked a question about how much a barn could cost to renovate, and obviously not every barn is every barn, and the devil's going to be in the detail. But the number that came back, which was a little bit over $1 million, I was like, this is maybe even bigger than anyone really has thought about. And with that said, details will matter, involvement will matter, and knowing where the possibilities are. Right? We're not looking just to spend money for like, oh, you could build a carnival. We get that, but to have as much detail so that we can really resolve this thing, right? Really. So yeah, I think it makes total sense. I won't babble anymore.
No, not at all. Okay. All right. Other discussion, comments on this item?
So the action item then is we're going to have a follow-up with, I don't know whether it's all of Silo Drury, someone from Silo Drury, and or forward planning.
Follow up with forward planning on and get a detailed proposal on their proposed market assessment study, the deliverables, timing, scope, etc. And we're not going to make any recommendation to the Board of Supervisors until we know if that element is to be incorporated or not.
Okay,
Steve?
so our next meeting is the 9th
Of February, yes.
of February, and the next Board of Supervisors meeting after that would be the 15th. Suzanne, yes. You're muted, Suzanne.
I believe you're correct. I'm just double checking.
Yes.
Okay.
Suzanne, how many days do they need to be able to get on the agenda for the 15th, though? Or,
To get on the agenda on the 15th, I mean, I can tell the chair, can we hold the space?
yeah.
And we publish the agenda, it has to be published, I believe it's 24 hours. We try to get it out at least that Monday. So that would be the 13th. Obviously sooner is better, but we get it that there are moving parts.
Okay. Yeah, if we meet on the 9th, we should have a final recommendation, which we can then, forward to the Board of Supervisors. And if you could ask them to, have a placeholder for the 15th on this topic, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same kind of pattern we're in right now, right? We have a hold, so I think that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Who is going to be meeting with forward planning? I don't believe you could have more than, you could only have only have 3 people, because 4 would be a majority and have to make it a public meeting. Is that correct?
Right. Let's let Jennifer coordinate some potential meeting times, see who's available. I think any 3 committee members could get more information, and certainly Jennifer, can get details, and we can forward it on to everyone. Steve?
Yeah, I was going to chime in earlier, but seemed to be going in a direction, and I was going to push it anyway. I wanted to make note of the response that I got from Conway Hickey about the clientele that they have been dealing with was mostly like at the state and county level, which makes it significantly different from our particular needs, I think, in terms of addressing people and even focus groups. So I was thinking that that was probably a big asset for the other team, which seemed to have made a number of comments during their presentation about trying to be inclusive and get as much information as they could. I also wanted to take note that at the site visit that we have, Doug seemed to be like the most excited person there, even more excited than even people from Lower Makefield. And I think he made that also clear in his presentation. So I'm wholeheartedly in favor of the consensus that I've seen tonight. So thank you. You've done a thorough job, Dennis.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. And if I might, not to put you on the spot, but Jim Majewski, this is very much in your wheelhouse. Do you have any observations, thoughts to this selection?
Well, based on everything that I heard in the presentations, and basically when we evaluate professional services, we try to break it down to a couple of components. One is what is their experience? Who are the people behind it? Have they done similar type of jobs? What's the price? Because the price obviously is a very important aspect of it. And I think when you broke all that down, they were even on a lot of points, but I thought the Seiler jury was a little bit more focused on what we are looking for in the terms of a master plan, as opposed to Connolly Hickey, who I think dwelled a little bit too much on actually getting the buildings to use when we have to figure out first what's the use. So I think Seiler jury is the one. And to go into your point about the use study, I think that's an important component of it, but as a few people mentioned, the timing of it is kind of critical. Do you do that first to see what uses there are, to then get public input with here are some possible uses, or do you gather public input and then say, based on that, what are the uses? So it all kind of goes hand in hand, and that's something that will need to be figured out by the committee and Jennifer.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Appreciate your weighing in.
Just to mention, Dennis, I think Katie McVan and Jim Majewski also said that we'd need to give them the go-ahead by Friday so they can get the public notice, right, for the board meeting? Or is that just for public meetings? Maybe that's just for public meetings.
The Monday will be fine, Fred. But I mean, you'll meet Thursday. I'll be here. I'll shoot an email and we'll get it all done.
Yeah, and actually, this item has a placeholder on the current Board of Supervisors agenda if you guys had come to a consensus and made a recommendation. And since you haven't, we can just easily pull that off before it's published to the public.
Okay.
That's what I said. It's like the same cadence for February. We'll meet Thursday.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you. Moving along, Jennifer, on the agenda, we talked we had an item about next steps following the Board of Supervisors approval. Let's say that all that happens by February 15th. Are there some plans and actions and schedules we should be conscious of now in anticipation of those early steps? Are there things we could be doing to prepare under the presumption that as of February 15th we have a selection and we're starting an engagement?
Yes. Yeah. The first thing is we'll ask for a detailed schedule from the consultant, but the committee can start looking at preferred outreach dates for sessions. And we also talked about trying to strategize a campaign so that we're keeping the public up to date as we progress through this. The committee should start thinking about what elements you would like to use to get information out, and how frequently. So you have vehicles to start in motion as soon as we get the award done.
Okay. Makes sense. That would seem like a natural lead into our next subject, wouldn't it? Ron, community outreach and engagement. We've talked about maybe forming a subcommittee that focuses on that, given the criticality of it. Do you want to take the lead on that conversation?
Sure. Let me just throw out a couple of ideas and build off some things that have already been said. Suzanne, a couple of minutes ago, said that this thing may be bigger than everybody thought. That kind of resonates with me, and the demands that places upon us, I think, for both public outreach and education and transparency are pretty profound. But I think, and what I'm thinking about, and I obviously don't have answers, I'd like to, head up that subcommittee and get some folks together to talk about this. But I can recall the Cellar Jury presentation. They talked about doing some monkey surveys, which are pennies on the dollar, web surveys, public meetings, focus group, key agency interviews. That's all in the tool chest, and there probably are a couple other things to bring it in from the outside. That's coming in from the outside. I'm a strong believer, particularly the way this is developing, that we're going to have to also do a lot of outreach. And the basis of that would be, I think, really good messaging. For example, the way you started this meeting, Dennis, about how we got to where we are is a great message to start educating folks in Lower Makefield Township about where this committee is going. It's a start. And I would think that the subcommittee should be thinking a lot about what the messaging should be. In the tool chest, perhaps everybody gets a deck, we'll call it a deck, 10 slides that they start to talk to various groups about what this committee is doing. Clearly, that would have to be timed as to how we're moving along in the development of the master plan. But I think with just going to the outside world and seeking input is just not enough. I think we're going to have to take control of the messaging and begin to craft how people perceive this ad hoc committee, how they perceive what the supervisors are doing here and what they've committed to, and the potential results that may come out of this. So we begin to get early buy-in from all the constituents. There obviously are some really key players who have particular positions about where we might come out, but there's a lot of others that need to hear where this is going. So I would say that this subcommittee, and then there's one other thing, Dennis, and that is, who should do this? Cellar Jury presented the fact that they could do it, do the public meetings, etc. I'm not sure if they're the right cast of characters to do it. Perhaps it's some other group. Obviously, that could add a further resource commitment. But I think it's fair game to discuss who is the right sort of agencies, if you will, to help us, A, get the public input we need, and B, also craft a messaging strategy for this ad hoc committee, for our ambassadors that we bring into this, and for the township supervisors. So I would hope that the subcommittee would start to think about all of that as an agenda and begin to come back with recommendations to the full committee. And I hope I excited some people to say that they would be volunteers on that committee.
There's a lot of action right now on video. You can't believe people jumping up and down. It's really incredible. Well,
So what
thank
do
you.
you think?
Thank you for those ideas and that suggestion and volunteering to head up that committee. You're absolutely right, and you're making a good point about both the incoming, the input, but also the education and the outreach. So I would look forward to that. Do we have any volunteers alongside Ron? Oh, Bet is raising her hand. Not real high. She didn't raise it real high, but I did see it.
All right,
Okay.
Ben, I got you, huh?
That makes sense to me.
Come on, Fred, you're a communications guy.
There he goes. There he
Oh,
goes.
there he is.
Now we're talking. Now we're talking. Okay. I think a subcommittee of 3 is perfect.
Okay.
And
Does
you
it-
know, sorry, Dennis and Ron, the
Yep.
township has, we have a Facebook page, we have a lot of social media, we have emails, we are constantly trying to get residents to sign up for it, so it may not be as robust as one might like it to be. You can sign on by going onto an agenda and clicking on the button. It's really easy, but we can use that as well to drive people to wherever Ron, or just to, send out information. I hope you're all following us.
Okay, thank you.
No,
And
that's
to
a
add
good
to
point.
Suzanne's point, obviously the township does have the website that we could have a dedicated page to this whole process that we could add information on as we go along, so that people can look at the whole history of things and look at reports and studies and everything. And our newsletter goes out. The next one will be arriving soon, but that was already decided on in December. The next newsletter that goes out in May, we need to have the content ready by March 4th. And it could be, if we're ready at that time, just to let people know that we have a web page up and available. And if we have it up by May, we could announce it on March 4th and have it up by May. I think that would be useful.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. That's an important deadline. That's a key punctuation mark. Jim, do you want to be a shadow member to this subcommittee?
Certainly. I was going to raise my hand, but I couldn't find it on the button down here. But I think I just found it. Raised hand.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, very good. Well, I would like to make a motion, and looking for a second, that this committee form a subcommittee for community outreach and engagement, and that Ron Schmidt act as the chair of that subcommittee. Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. I can't see Jim Scott if his hands, there you go. Okay, it's unanimous. All right, we have a subcommittee. Congratulations, Ron. Go forth and multiply.
Educate.
Educate.
Educate. Okay. All right, makes sense. Thank you all. Thank you for everyone's engagement there. The next topic that we just added on, because it became part of a discussion through the discussion of contractors, and I thought it was important to get it into this agenda, and it will be in future agendas as well, because I think this is an area for education and awareness, which is the topic of National Registry of Historical Places. And I've asked if Joe could talk to that subject, answer questions that the committee or stakeholders might have about that. So, Joe, could I turn it over to you, please?
Yes, thank you, Dennis. And I'm sure there's a lot of people on this call who actually know this topic much better than I do. But Dennis asked me if I would just take a few minutes to just kind of level set the group on what the National Register of Historic Places is, what it means and what it doesn't mean. And it's important for us to understand that because this is a property that is actually Patterson Farm is two properties, right, that are both eligible to be on the National Register of Historic Places. And the Historic Commission has been putting together a submission to include those onto the National Register. So the National Register of Historic Places came into being about in 1966 as part of the National Preservation Act. And there's a time in America, of course, post-World War II, everything was growing, everything was being developed and redeveloped, and there was concern that we were starting to lose a lot of our historic buildings to demolition and redevelopment. So the government, the federal government had put together or passed the National Preservation Act, which had a lot of different components to it, including some federal tax credits. But one of the most important things is it put together a national register, which allowed Americans to actually nominate and have a list of all the historic places in America. So you can go onto the National Register and you can see all the places that have been accepted. I'm not going to talk very much about the nomination or criteria for the National Register, but I will just talk a little bit about the implications. And I have one slide here that I'd like to show if I can share my screen. Okay. Are you seeing that?
Not yet.
Neither am I.
Do you have multiple screens? Because it may be going to.
You have multiple screens. So let me stop sharing. Let me move this. Suzanne, you really are a whiz at Zoom, huh? Let me just move it over to my other screen. Now do you see it?
Yes.
Okay, very
Oh,
good.
now and the pre-barn.
I can do this here. Now do you see the slide? Okay, you see this?
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, very good. So looking down the left-hand side, I won't go through all this, but it really, as I said before, it identifies the historically significant buildings and sites, because it's important to understand that with the two farmsteads, that our intent is not to list the buildings, Satterthwaite House, Johnny Brown House, is actually to list the sites as farms. The significance of Patterson Farm or the two farms or other agricultural significance. And that's the work that the Historical Commission has been doing. So in that, it is not just what they call the manor houses or the main houses, but also some of those the barns and other properties become very important, for that submission. It encourages preservation. One of the important things is it enables a review of any types of federal or state or even local projects that would go on. This is the so-called Section 106 reviews that are done to understand would a project have an impact on a property that's historically significant. You'll see on the right-hand side, it doesn't stop the project, right? But it could actually force the project to actually change or make some allowances not to damage or destroy the historical content of a property on the National Register. And on the last bullet point down here, it encourages rehabilitation of what they call income-producing historic properties. So not residential properties, but income-producing properties that meet preservation standards through tax credits. That meet preservation standards is an important clause because the Secretary of Interior has established a set of criteria for how to do preservations of these properties. And you would have to adhere to that criteria if you actually want to get the federal tax credits. In addition to tax credits, there's also grants that are available, mostly through the state, and sometimes the local governments have grants available for properties that are on the National Register. The Keystone Preservation grants here in Pennsylvania are a good example of that. So there's a lot of benefits of having it. If you look at Lower Makefield Township, there's a number of properties in the township that are already on the National Register. There's a number of private residences that are there. Slate Hill Cemetery on Yardley Morrisville Road is on the National Register of Historic Places, as well as Edgewood Village, which is not necessarily one property, but it's actually what's called a historic district. And there's a number of properties back there that are on the National Register. But there's other things that the National Register doesn't do that is important. And probably the first one is it doesn't really restrict the rights of the owner in the way that they develop the property, or even if they decide to demolish the property. Just because a property is on the National Register of Historic Places doesn't mean it can't be torn down by the owner. It can be torn down by the owner. Or it can be developed in a way that's not consistent with the historic significance. Now, again, there's not going to be any grant funding for that. There's not going to be any tax credits for that, but it doesn't restrict the owner from doing what's necessary with the property. As I mentioned, it doesn't necessarily stop federal or state projects on the site, but the review does, create the chance for people to make allowances for how the project should change to accommodate the sites. It also doesn't guarantee any grant funds. I mean, one of the things that the Historic Commission is working on right now is to apply for some grant funding for Slate Hill Cemetery. We might not get it. There's no guarantee that we'll get it just because it's on the National Register. It still is open to a state agency which makes those decisions. So I just wanted to make sure that people understood the benefits of that. And I think Siler Drury, one of the things they did nice in their presentation is they talked about different types of programs that might be available to us to fund the rehabilitation or the restoration, and they were going to bring that in terms of their master plan. And I think that's really very, very important. So I think it's there. It does allow money to it allows us to offset the costs through grants. But on the other hand, it doesn't restrict us from making any necessary changes we need to make to the building, should that be necessary. Any questions around that? Comments? Steve, Jennifer, I know you also have tons of experience with this. Would you add anything else?
I have a question.
That was very good. That was very good.
That question?
Yes, what's the timetable for this?
So for the Historical Commission, Patterson Farm was submitted, actually Jenny Brown was actually submitted around 10 years ago.
Yes,
and never actually made it through the state. And I don't know actually why it wasn't picked up, why it was just dropped. So we picked it up again. We had, Ron facilitated a call with the Pennsylvania, it's called the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO. And we had a really good call with them last week about properties. They knew about both properties. They encouraged us to, continue to pursue the agricultural significance of the farms. And they offered to review the information that we had currently prepared and tell us, how far away we were from being able to resubmit the property. So ideally, we would do it, this year. But I think when we have that review with the SHPO, we'll have a much better feel for how much more effort's needed.
Okay, thank you.
Question, Joe, and we're in just this initiation of a master planning process, with contractors, et cetera. Is there any reason to manage the timing of this? Does it impact? Is there every incentive to go as fast as we can? Is there incentive to maybe wait and see, where some of the planning is going and then do it? How does it interact? How would this application interact with our master planning process, or how much should it interact?
So I've thought about this, right? The question, I know, let me stop sharing here. There is a lot of questions around the integrity, architectural integrity of some of the buildings out there, and whether those buildings can be rehabilitated or restored or even preserved, right? But in so much that this is a farm that has been continuously farmed for 300 years, they're historically significant to that. So having the buildings there in terms of making the case for the National Register would be good. If you look at the analysis that I did, we did an analysis for the ad hoc property committee. It's in your report, and I looked at 12 barns in Bucks County that are on the National Register, and I documented which of their so-called outbuildings are there. But again, the more buildings that contribute to that are present would be good in order to make the case. Again, that doesn't then restrict us if we say there's no way to preserve this building, we can't maintain it, we should just document it and take it down. It doesn't restrict us from doing that. If on the other hand, we do that first and we don't have the building anymore, it may impact the historical significance.
Okay.
Joe, you had asked for, sorry.
Steve.
You had asked for a comment about your list that you had up on the screen, and you certainly went through them, all the parts of it, and I think it's absolutely clear. I did want to refer specifically to the grants that might be available. One of the grants that might have helped us out would be that they sometimes make a grant for master planning.
Yeah.
So if we had done it 10 years ago, we would have been in better shape. I think getting it as soon as we can get the paperwork together and the response from SHPOs would be the best move we can get. I think that that's one of the reasons why I guess it was Siler Driller wanted to proceed on that, is that they think that if they do make a presentation that suggests a certain usage, and they say, and here is how we can fund it, that's going to make a big difference.
Right.
So, you know, the money is the big thing. Not that we can get it, not that it's available, but that it's a possibility.
Okay.
The other thing I would say, Dennis, is we haven't discussed this, right? But I mean, there could be a scenario where not all of the buildings continue to be owned by the township. They could be, one or two of them could be sold to a private entity that could be using them for either for a profit or for a nonprofit, right? Then the federal tax credits come in if the building's on the National Register. If a private entity were to come in and pick up the rehabilitation or restoration costs, then they could apply for the federal tax credits. So it would be advantageous.
I think I've made it through all of the minutes, but perhaps I haven't. Did the township authorize the applications or application?
We have not presented it to the Board of Supervisors yet in terms of, because we haven't completed it yet. So
Yeah, okay. No, makes perfect sense, but probably is a formality. I mean, even like, I guess someone's got to sign it from the township, right, as a property owner, I would imagine.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Historical Commission works on behalf of the township, so the township would need to submit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So everything you're
timing,
go ahead, Fred, sorry.
given the time involved in this process, it might be incumbent on the Historic Commission to mention as part of that discussion with the board that they and both that commission and this committee should be aware if the new manager or the Public Works Department decides that they need to do something with one of those buildings, that we should be aware of it, and they also should be aware that it could have impact on your application.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, Fred, that's a good point.
Yeah. But everything that you're suggesting, Joe, is there's no, I'm getting the message, there's no reason to wait, and there's potential benefits to doing it as soon as possible.
Yeah,
because it'll support, it can help support potentially some of the work that's going to have to be done.
Yes, and it doesn't restrict the committee in its decisions in any way.
Okay. Is that, is any other thoughts from the committee? I mean, I'm hearing that, not that the committee's doing this, but responsible for the master plan, we should be aware that the registration or application is in the process. And it sounds like this committee should support it. Beth, question.
Yes, in the committee's initial recommendations last year, there were discussions about, I believe it was the chicken coop that's over at Satterthwaite, that was
The corn crib.
corn crib,
Mhm.
corn crib that was in very poor condition. So you're saying between Fred and Joe, if I'm hearing you right, you want to make sure the township doesn't do anything with that until the application is done?
I don't know if the application would rest just on a corn crib, you know?
I'm just checking.
So, but certainly if you're taking out a barn, yes, that's a big issue, right?
I don't think the barns are going anywhere, but the corn crib was in very bad condition.
I want to say, probably a little bit of overstatement to say the application. Well, the research is still undergoing, right? And once we complete the research, then we can start to fill out the official application. And you know, the research is really kind of based on what crops were grown there and the significance of the crops for the period in which they were grown. So again, general agriculture, things that contribute to the barn to the farm are really important. If it turns out that, you know, for a certain period of time, you know, chickens were the major part, then maybe the chicken coop could also be important. I don't think
There's no chicken coop, it's a corn crib. I'm sorry, I misspoke.
But yeah.
In terms of that research, Joe, is it, so are the agricultural practices that went on there is part of that, consideration?
Definitely, and in the agricultural yields, especially, that's where most of the research that's being done right now is looking at going back for the records, you know, in the 19th century and in the 20th century. Then you can begin to see how it moves from more of a general farm to a specialized farm. I mean, once the railroad and the canal come in and farms start to specialize around certain products, you start to see how the output and the yields differ. That's what we're trying to document.
Okay. I suggest you include an interview with Sam Stewart in that regard, because he has memories of the Pattersons when he was a boy and some of their practices, including a very innovative irrigation system where Mr. Patterson would pump water from a well into that pond that's right there by the driveway so that the water would warm up, and he had a siphon at the surface of the pond so it would siphon the warmed water from the sun and spray it on his tomato plants without shocking them, because if you hit the tomato plants with, you know, ice cold water, you can cause the plants harm. I mean, there are things like that, you know, may be useful to know. I don't know, but I suggest you talk to Sam. He's got quite a few stories.
Okay.
If it's helpful. Okay. Well, it's again, this committee isn't involved in this application. It's really between the Historical Commission and the township. But I think from everything I hear, we encourage you to go forth as fast as you can.
All right. Thank you, Dennis.
Okay.
Public comment.
Yeah. Is there any other business anyone wants to raise before public comment? Anything
And
from the
since as I mentioned, we do have a new manager, and also with Derek Fuller as Public Works manager, it might be incumbent on us to bring them up to speed on what the committee is all about and where we stand with this process.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that
I know
makes sense.
Derek and the new manager did a and the parks person did a drive through this week of many of the township properties. So
Okay.
they're getting up to speed.
But I'm happy to take that back and check in with them and see what level of information would be helpful.
Sure. Sure. Suzanne, thank you. And just say if they want to learn more about the committee or just, have a session to download in either direction, we're available. I'd be available to meet with them or have a phone call, whatever. Great. Thank you, Fred. All right. Public comments. Do we have any public comments from our Zoom organizer?
There's no public comments at this time.
Public comment. That's kind of good news, bad news. Good news for the schedule, bad news for the input, but that's all right. All right, Bet, you have a list of action items?
The action items I have are having Jennifer arrange a meeting with Forward Planning, and then seeing who's available at that time, but not more than 3 people at any given meeting. We convened a subcommittee with Ron as the chair to work on messaging and educating the public. And we supported the township moving forward with an application for the farmsteads for the National Historic Registry.
Okay. And
we tabled
we
the
tabled
decision.
the vote on the selection.
Tabled the vote on the selection until additional information is in.
Right. We tabled the minutes, and I
did
volunteered
table the
to
minutes.
draft a decision-making policy to run by the committee before next meeting.
Yes, I'm writing that down.
Okay. Thank you.
Dennis and Jennifer, if there's anything that we might have missed in the documentation that's been going on the last 2 weeks, just bring that to our attention so that we can get that out to the committee.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else other than those 2 most recent, but just in case.
Yeah, there isn't, but
Okay.
I'll forward anything I get.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Hearing no other subjects, I have a motion to
Motion
adjourn.
to adjourn.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. Have a very good night. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
work.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone.